So we developed the NEO assessment, and it's a 35 question assessment. It takes about 20 minutes to do. And it gives you basically a 6-page report that helps you understand how you're going to experience the 6 centers of doubt on your exit. This is something for somebody to take before they exit. And then the other thing that it does is it gives you recommendations on things that you can do to create fulfillment or find significance. What I will say is, you were mentioning or alluding to the 3 Ds and the 1B. So
Mhm.
it's death, divorce, disease, or and then burnout. Those are the four things that force people to exit maybe outside of their desire, right? Outside of their wishes or outside of their timing. Yeah. And so it's our business model to help people exit with confidence and certainty because you're giving that up in concept and trading it in for some money. The cool thing, and you've talked about depression, and I don't think most founders have a diagnosis, at least in the beginning, but you start letting this thing go unchecked and it can get really dark really fast.
Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. This episode of How to Exit is brought to you by Final Ascent, the boutique M&A firm helping lower middle market business owners achieve their ultimate exit. At Final Ascent, they know selling your business is one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make, and they've been in your shoes. Their team isn't just made of advisors. They're experienced business owners who have successfully navigated their own exits. Final Ascent specializes in preparing businesses for sale, building value, and connecting with a national network of qualified buyers who will compete for your business. They don't take on a client unless they're confident they can sell your business at the current market maximum value. Whether you're ready to sell now or planning for the future, they'll craft a roadmap tailored to your unique goals so that you can walk away with maximum value and a peace of mind. Start your journey today at Final Ascent. That's www.finalascent.com, because your next chapter starts with a successful exit. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to How to Exit. Today I'm back with Jerome Myers. He is the founder of Exit to Excellence. We've had a show. If you've been a regular listener or watcher of the show, you'll notice this is a reoccurring gentleman here. You and I have been in enough Zoom rooms and interactions with each other. I consider you your friend. So thank you for coming back, sharing your time with us and your knowledge with us. This is going to be a fun conversation today.
Friend is a special word and not one that gets thrown around lightly. So, Ron, I really appreciate you characterizing me that way. Really been fun growing with you over the past couple of years and appreciate you having me come on the show back in 2023, I believe, or it was beginning of 2024. Here we are in 2025, man. It's very rare for people to do as many episodes as you've done on this type of content. And so, man, to be a repeat guest is just an honor. So thank you.
I'll be honest, there have been quite a few people that asked to come back on, and there's only a handful of people I've said yes to. So consider it a compliment. I like who you are, what you're up to, and kind of the vibe you have as a human being really resonates with me. And I think it's really useful for the community to have people like yourself out there helping them with your heart, what you have in mind, and what you do for these sellers and what you do for the community in general. It's not just the money-driven heart. So we'll get into that. But I really appreciate kind of who you are as a human being and the time you spend with us. We'll get past the mushy stuff here.
I think we need more of it, man.
Yeah.
I think we live in a world where most men aren't comfortable enough to share that they value and appreciate each other. And maybe it's women too, but I just know I watch a lot of guys. We've been taught to be tough and to not care and to kind of be cold and harsh. And that's the way exits have been done, right? It's how can we get maximum evaluation? But there's a whole person involved that's spent a long time building something that's worth selling. And if we treat them as an inanimate object, it does a lot of detriment to them, and I think there's something wrong with that, so
I was just talking to somebody earlier today. We did our monthly networking thing this morning, and one of the guys was on there, said he wanted to be a billionaire. And I was like, okay, wait a through mergers and acquisitions. I said, you do understand that you're working in the millionaire space, and that when you move to the next level up, it's a whole different conversation. And it's a whole different game, right? You're going from like brokers where and business owners where rapport and connection and your ability to take the legacy of that company and the safety of those employees and keep it where that owner's expecting. That's what this level is, a $10 million deal and smaller. When you get into that mid market, I think these companies lose a lot of their soul, right? They lose a lot of that heart. They become more, anytime that cap table has more than 3 or 4 people on it, they start to become more money driven, money centric. The vision of the company, where it's going, where it's going to take the shareholders, becomes more important than the heart and soul of the original owner. But in this stage, you'll lose more deals, hands down, through not understanding the human side of this transaction than you will in any other stage in any other business there is. So, yeah, I believe that about a lot.
it's really interesting, right? I I think business gets done between 2 people, and anybody that's going in and I think the majority of your audience is looking to buy businesses or, maybe they're interested in selling it, but they're interested in the transaction, and the moment that you realize that I'm talking to another person, you're heads and heels above other folks who are in this space who think, "Oh, I'm just gonna get the revenue, I'm gonna multiply it by whatever the multiple is, and then I'm gonna make them an offer." There's so much more that's wrapped up in this transaction, and while you might just feel like you're just signing some papers and sending a wire, that that doesn't begin to dig into the true essence of what it takes to get somebody to give up what most people will call their purpose, for some money.
So before we get too far, let's do a little bit of your origin story, kind of, so the people who
Yeah.
have never seen their first episode where you're on here, for the people who just is their first encounter they have with you. Jerome, tell people who you are and kind of how you got into this space so that they can make that connection I have with you.
Yeah, so if I skip over all of the, like, true background stuff and just kinda get to where the rubber meets the road, I built a $20 million division for a Fortune 550. On January 13th, I was employee number 2. By the end of September, I had 175 employees. By the end of the year, we did $20 million in revenue, 30% profit margins. I get a phone call on December 24th, and it goes something like this. It was 4:55. "Hey, Jerome, we're gonna lay half the team off." I was like, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, we're gonna lay half the team off. I know you and I have been going back and forth about this for a couple of weeks, and I've made a decision." I was like, "Man, that's not the right decision." And we went back and forth for a little bit. He's like, "Look, man, I didn't call to negotiate with you. I called to inform you of what the decision is. I'll talk to you in the new year." And he hung up the phone. And for me, that was the moment that I realized that while it felt like I was an entrepreneur, the buck didn't really stop with me. Somebody who I saw once a quarter and talked to every other week could give me a call and tell me what to do. And that didn't sit well with me. However, I kept going, right? So we put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And then the next year we did another 20 million with half the people. We made another 30% profit margin. But this year it was Thanksgiving and I'm standing in front of my team and I'm like, "Hey, I don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. Don't spend all your money on Black Friday." And that's when all of my leadership credibility kind of oozed out on the floor. It's like, I can't do this. I'm not actually in control. I need to be the one to make the decisions. And so I decided to leave corporate and went into real estate full time. I thought I was going to buy apartments right off the bat, but that didn't work out. So I started fixing and flipping houses, something you and I have in common. Did that for a while, then finally got into apartments and went full cycle on a number of those. And what I realized in doing those deals was nobody actually cared about uh, me as far as people coming into my office and talking about my impact. I talked to partners on the deals when they wanted to know when they were going to get their next distribution or when we were going to buy the next deal. And that was kind of the end and beginning and the end of those interactions. And if the residents wanted to talk to you, it wasn't because you were doing a great job, it was to complain. And so something was missing. Something was missing for me. I was like, man, what could I do? And so we started working with founders and helping them make more money because that's what you do when you're a consultant or a coach. And the promise was we'll double your revenue, double your time off, and double your charitable giving. And we did that. And we did it some more, and we did it some more. And what I realized is even in doing that, there was no fulfillment for me. Making more money wasn't more fulfilling. Them having more time off to do whatever with the extra money they had wasn't fulfilling. They weren't actually doing something that was purpose centered or driven. It was just like, how can I consume? How can I indulge the hedonistic tendencies that we all have? And so I was like, man, where's the gap? Like where can I really make a difference? And so I'm standing in the back of a business conference and a guy just exited Kajabi and they sold for 2 billion. And he's like, this is my 7 steps to have a double unicorn exit. And he was laughing about it because he's like, yeah, it's way more than 7 steps, but how do you get there? And so he gets to towards the end of his presentation, he said, I was drinking and thinking. And I was sitting on the couch one day, and my wife told me that I should get a job application from In-N-Out Burger because I was moping and I wasn't being my normal self. He said I was sad panda. And so we get to Q&A, and I said, tell me about this experience. I think you called it an existential crisis. And he said, yeah. I said, how'd you get out of your crisis? He said, well, I'll let you know when I do. And so somebody who had a double unicorn exit didn't have an answer for this feeling that they had of loss, of emptiness, of lack of passion, a lack of purpose. But they had all of the resources available to them. How is that so? So I went off and I started doing research, Ron. And I found one Harvard Business Review article, and it said, congratulations, you sold your business. Now prepare to be depressed. And there was nothing else out there, and maybe a case study from Yale from some graduate students, but there wasn't any research. And so we started doing the research. We wanted to solve this problem that we call the founder's exit paradox. It's like, oh man, this amazing thing happened, but why do I feel sad? And when we started digging into the way that traditional M&A is done, we realize why people experience what they have. And we want people to exit to excellence. Most people are exiting from their business. It's our perspective that if you exit to excellence, it totally transforms the way that you experience your exit as a founder.
You know, that experience, that depression that happens, it occurs in a lot of high achievers. Neil Armstrong, who walked on the moon, and some other people are very well documented to have severe depression, right? There's a lot of movie stars who have made tens of millions, hundreds of millions who have severe depression. Once you've done a lot of that stuff, it's like, what's next? Like that sense of fulfillment. And it leads to a chemical imbalance. You're so used to all the serotonin and dopamine and everything else from adrenaline flowing through your body that it triggers the same chemicals that cause clinical depression, right? Just knowing that that's there and knowing that these business owners they just had one of the most probably exhilarating things I've done in a long time, especially the double unicorn exit where the guy is exiting to tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. What the hell can you do to top that, right? And that's where the depression kicks in. I've walked on the moon. What the hell do I do next, right?
Yeah. What's interesting as we get through more of these exits is that after the wire hits, it wears off really quickly.
Days, if that.
I had one person that didn't last the whole weekend. So the
Yeah.
wire hit Friday, Sunday, she's like, "What is going on? Is this it?" Unfortunately. Now you've got a number in your bank account, so you might have some safety, but it doesn't solve any of the problems.
Right.
It doesn't fix anything. In fact, it just amplifies all the things that were there because now you have the money and the time.
What does they say? Idle hand. There's a thing about idle hands, right? Like it's not
The
good to
devil's
just
workshop. Yeah.
you know. I personally don't do very well with it. A very full bank account and a very empty calendar, and not very many people do, right? Like I'm getting a little older now. I've had some major injuries, a bad car wreck, and military injuries finally caught up with me and has me pretty torn up. That said, I don't go skydiving, I don't go do bungee jumping. I've never got injured doing any of those things, but my body just won't stand for it these days, right? But that whole what do I do now, right? Has to be addressed. A lot of deals fail because of this. A lot of people don't get that. That's one of the I've interviewed about 300 people at this point, and I asked a lot of people what's the number one reason a deal falls through. And the ones that haven't done many deals will tell you, well, the seller backs out. The ones that done enough will tell you the seller backed out because they didn't know what's next. They were the fear of the unknown stopped them from closing the deal.
Yeah, and so it's our business model to help people exit with confidence and certainty because you're giving that up in concept and trading it in for some money. The cool thing, and you've talked about depression, and I don't think most founders have a diagnosis, at least in the beginning, but you start letting this thing go unchecked and it can get really dark really fast. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you look at the pyramid, the first two levels are the only ones that have anything to do with money. The other ones, the ones love and belonging and meaning in the world and self-actualization, that's got nothing to do with money. And so everybody who thinks, "Oh, you got enough money, you'll figure it out," the money isn't the answer.
And that said, it is critically important for people to understand that if I ask 100 people out there right now, who are you? You'll tell me what you do. 100 people, 90 people out of 100 will tell me what they do. They tie their
97,
identity
98. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to what they do, right? I do it for fun sometimes. I'll be sitting in a coffee shop, somebody sit by me and they're starting to chat. I was like, oh, cool, what do you do? Or who are you? Like, I won't say that. I'm sorry. I say, like, who are you? And they'll go, well, I'm a fireman or I'm this. Like, no, 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 that's what you do. Who are you? Right? And they'll give me something else about what they do. And I was like, no, 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 that's what you do. Right? That's what you have. Right? Who are you? What do you enjoy in life? And a lot of people just don't know. It's a deep conversation, deeper than it shouldn't be that deep. It's a deep conversation for most people, right?
The more we travel, the more we find that people outside of Europe and the US don't ever talk about that. That's a third or fourth conversation topic. We are human beings, not human doings, to your point.
Tell me about this, the acronym you guys use for N.E.X.T, right?
Yeah.
And tell me about how do you help address this problem?
Yeah. So I think addressing the problem is a little more nuanced than the acronym for next. And you've mentioned it a few times. What's next? We think about your next, right? What's your next?
Mm-hmm.
And next stands for nourish, evaluate, explore, and transcend. And so it's our 4-step process for helping people move into that new space with confidence and clarity. We want them to do what no founder wants to do, which is actually sit back and think about the things that they've done well. Get some outside feedback on their talents and their gifts. Most people just want to check the box and move on, and there is no intentional review or reflection. And as founders, I think it's extremely important for that because you actually be able to see your toolbox. Right? What arrows do you have in the quiver that are usable in something other than the business that you just sold? 'Cause I think most people just miss that. They think, oh, well, I'm only good at this one thing because they spent 15 to 45 years working on the business that they just sold. And that's not the case ever. And so then the other thing that holds them back is the fear of being successful at something new, which if you know what your skills are, that fear starts to evaporate because you know I'm good at this and I'm good at this. And these are things I need in order to be great at this next thing that I'm working on. The E is for evaluate. And so you've got all the resources. You went through the nourish phase, you got your resources. Now you want to evaluate those resources and see what you can apply them against. Because I don't believe that most people truly take the time to assess what's available to them. Most people are just doing what's been presented to them. The understanding that you truly have a choice, right? If I go back to my experience of telling the team that, hey, they made me lay folks off, like I had a choice. And you can give your agency up. I don't think this is a wise decision, but we had a choice. And so making sure that they understand what their choices are and that they can apply those resources against those choices for the one that they think is going to be most successful. And then you start to evaluate the path to actually execute against what you evaluated. So the exploration is a the best way I can describe it is if I'm driving from North Carolina where I am to you in California, Ron, I just need to start heading west. I don't even need to know what city you're in. I don't need to know what part of California you're in initially. I just need to start heading west. And then along the way, I can get more information that's going to get me to dialed in. So, okay, maybe I need to be going to Northern California. All right, now maybe I need to be going to a specific region in California. Now I need to go to a specific city. Then I get to the street. I still don't even need to know your house number, right? I just need to know the street at this point. And then eventually I need to know the house number. And we believe Explore works the same way. I think so many people are scared to go on the journey because they don't know the house number. But you just need to go in the general direction. You need to know what the North Star is and start heading that way. And then the steps get revealed to you along that journey. Now, you want to have some type of plan, but the details of that plan really get fleshed out as you're moving in the journey. And then, the transcend is okay. So now we figured out where Ron is. How do we actually be that thing that we thought we were going to be? And so what we really look for is who do the people want to serve? What problem do they want to solve for them? And then conceptually, how much money do we believe they can make doing that? And, some people are like, oh, well, I've got enough money. That's great. But if you're creating value in the world, there's probably an opportunity for you to monetize that. And while it's not your primary driver focus, we want you to understand that there's opportunity there and there's some type of reward outside of the feeling good from actually serving others.
How do people? I mean, is it a lot of charity work? What are they doing next? On that type of stuff. Some people, that's where they go next, is they work for some type of charity or organization where they feel like they're contributing to society. You see some of that, or
Yeah, so it's contribution to the greater good. It's the only way that you actually create significance, which is our version of legacy.
yeah,
Now, what that looks like can be a plethora of things. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit. It can be a for-profit business for a specific group of people. One person that we work with, they're working on housing. So they rent a house and then people who are in transition from being an addict and getting back on their feet, they come in this, I don't want to call it a halfway house, but similar model where, there's multiple people in that space and they're making $4,000 on a property that might have only rented for $1,500 as an example. And you do enough of those, you get to some real scale. There's one person that started stuff in education. The things that they missed in childhood education, they were focused on doing that. One lady decided not to sell everything. So she had multiple dental offices and she sold off 3 of the 6 that she had and is in the process of selling one more. She's keeping the other 2 as income and she's taking it slow for the last couple of years that her daughter's in the house with her as she navigates high school. The beautiful thing is we don't dictate or determine what their next is. Their journey does. And so for the people that actually engage with us for what we call the next intensive, which is a 2-hour interview to get a comprehensive set of data on how they got to where they are. And then another 2 hours where we just talk to them about them over the course of this 33-page report that we write for them. It tells us the problem that they are uniquely qualified to solve for the world. It tells us the people that they're best qualified to help with that problem. And then with some basic modeling, we can come to an idea of what they're going to make from making that investment of time and skill set to help make the world a better place. And so it's really just a function of what problem do they have the capability of solving. And if they have that and they really lock in on it, it's amazing what can happen.
I can see that. You see people exiting for all different reasons, right? They're either aging out, meaning they're running to retire and, it's time. They're, say, 60 plus. Let's just be nice and say that, right? So most of these guys are 70 plus. Some of them are 80 plus, so they're aging out. And there's all these there's health concerns, there's divorce, right? A lot of times it's forced exits, what I call forced exits. So that's your health, divorce, end of life type of situations. But do you deal with a lot of that, or is it mostly earlier stage where it's a strategic or lifestyle decision to exit at an earlier time?
So it's always our preference to do stuff as early as possible for them. What I will say is, you were mentioning or alluding to the 3 Ds and the 1B. So
hmm
it's death, divorce, disease, and then burnout. Those are the 4 things that force people to exit maybe outside of their desire, right? Outside of their wishes or outside of their timing. And so those cases, they don't typically have the luxury of putting together an exit plan or a succession plan and then moving off to the next thing. And many of those folks don't actually get the money that they thought they were going to get at that liquidity event. They're just trying to get out because time is the most important constraint there instead of the deal structure. For the people who actually are doing succession planning or exit planning, we believe that, that process takes 2 to 3 years if they're going to do it right and maximize valuation as well as preparedness on the personal side. And so we prefer that model. Now, there are people, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, who exit and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I thought I was going to take a year off and I was just going to hang out. And that didn't work out for them. Right. They ended up in the hole, and that hole was not what they hoped that it would be. And they don't know how to get out of it, and they need some support. And sometimes those folks end up in the counselor's chair or therapist chair because they need somebody with the license who can help them work through the complexities of the turmoil that they kind of sunk into.
It's not uncommon for that to occur. What do you think is what word I'm looking for? What's the optimal? I mean, if somebody's chugging along, they're running their business, what are the early indications it's time to do something else? Like, to me, I've been in burnout a few times, and it kind of feels like it's no way it's possible that it happened this way, but it honestly feels like burnout just gets sprung on you. One day you wake up and you're like, I don't freaking feel like doing this anymore. But that's never the case when you really look back. You can see indications and declining performance over time, right? 6 months before that day you woke up and said, I just don't want to do this anymore. You started doing less, right? In most cases. And but what do you see? How can somebody detect when it's time? Like, hey, okay, it's probably time to start talking to Jerome about what I do next here. What are some of those early indicators somebody can look for in their own life and their own business?
I think the biggest thing is you realize that you've probably built it as big as you're going to build it. That for me is the biggest struggle that I see people working through. It's like, well, what else am I going to do? And you can always come up with something, but is that really what you're passionate about? And if you're not, then you should be moving to something else because that's what's going to actually move you into a new space. And one of the things that we talk about regularly is how do we get you out of the comfort zone? Because that's where the growth is. Sometimes we sit in this cage of comfort. We've known this because we've been doing it for 15 years. We know the answers because we've been through all the problems. And that gets monotonous. It gets boring. There's no excitement in it. And I think for many of the founders, they lose that passion, they lose that excitement, and it doesn't hold their attention anymore. And so then they start trying to multitask. And in the end, they kill what they built because they didn't continue to make the investments necessary because it wasn't their interest anymore.
Now, you were telling me beforehand you just got back from a trip from Mexico and stuff. Did that have anything to do with the exiting in business and other stuff?
So I believe that if we're going to put people or guide people on this journey, that we actually have to be living a life that takes your breath away. And so we go on trips, we spend our time stretching the realm of possibility and capability so that when people say, oh, no, I couldn't do that, we've got a story firsthand, whether it's us or one of our clients that did the exact thing that they're talking about not being able to do. It's very difficult for someone to have a conversation with me about something that they can or can't do if I just did it or if I just help somebody else do it. And a lot of times those conversations end prematurely because they catch themselves because they've heard about the opportunity. And so for us, like this, we spent the week between or the first week of this year. I consider the first week of this year because the third was the first Friday or Saturday. We spent it in Mexico, and we're parasailing, and we had a ritual with the shaman, and we had this really cool meal, and this golden tomahawk on New Year's Eve, and uh, ATVs, and we catamaran snorkeling, all this cool stuff, right? And it's like, oh well, yeah, you could have saved that money, or you could have worked, but is that returning? Is that the maximum return on life? And I just don't think that people are optimizing for the return on life.
Now, the ritual you grazed over there, is that your first time doing that one, or have you done that before?
That was the first one. No, we did one in so we were in Playa del Carmen for this one.
Mhm.
We did one in Tulum before. And this was an ayahuasca or some of the more intense stuff that people do. This is more of a saging and some chants, and we actually hugged a tree, which was a new thing for me. Releasing the things that were holding us back. So yeah, it was this that was a second experience in Mexico with something like that.
But talk about these other what are some of the things that you send people? I'm positive you're not sending everybody that sells a business on an ayahuasca voyage. I get that. It's just there's different things. Do you have people that they try cruises? What do they try to open up their experience? Because I know for a fact traveling abroad really changes your perspective on things. Sometimes you'll come back with all kinds of business ideas, or you'll come back with a new view on life when you see another area and stuff. Do you recommend travel for these guys, or is there anything in that realm?
Yeah, so I will say that everybody's script, right, is different and it's based on their previous experiences. The thing that we really want them to do is spend time in intentional review and reflection. And that's something that a lot of people try to avoid. And, you can do that in a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different places. For some people, it's just writing, Ron, figuring out what they're really grateful for and what they want to be remembered for. For other people, we have them do use this tool we call the 2C matrix. And so one of the things that is the biggest impact on the backside of an exit is the changes in your relationships. And so we ask people to think about the 5 people they spend the most time with. And unfortunately, when you're in business, 60% of the people that you spend the most of your time with are related to business. And when you exit your business, you lose those relationships. So imagine only being able to talk to 2 of the 5 people you spend most of your time with right now. All right. Now let's think about those 2 people. More often than not, one of them is your spouse if you're in some type of romantic relationship. And then the other is either some type of childhood friend or some type of mentor that's outside the business, but it's one of those 2 buckets. And those people end up in one of 3 boxes. They almost never end up in the mutually beneficial box. They end up in the uninspiring box, the underutilized box, or the draining box. And if you think about 2 people and none of them are in the optimal box, at best you're batting 50%, right? At the very best. But more than likely, you're probably only getting 30% out of your relationships. And so you're immediately going to feel a drag, a drain, because you don't have folks pouring into you. This is important because we want people to understand that that's going to happen before they get to their exit so that they can start building relationships outside the business so that that part of the change isn't as much of a shock as it would be had they not spent the time investing in building new relationships that have people who have real capacity to help them as they move into their next space, as well as people who are actually going to roll up their sleeves and contribute. And that's what we value relationships on, or we rank them on, is how much does a person contribute and how much capacity do they actually have?
It's brilliant you cover that, because of the few people, I've had quite a few people where I try to get them on the show after they sell a business, but because of NDAs and stuff, they won't. But they'll tell me their story one-on-one. And there's a reoccurring theme of loneliness after they sell their company. And I was like, well, what's the thing that hit you the hardest you didn't think would hit you the hardest? Like, now that you sold this company, one of the guys sold the company, he pocketed about $350 million, right? And he's doing some charity stuff. And now he's like, and I asked him, I said, what's the thing that hit you the hardest? And he said, the loneliness. I said, what do you mean? I've built that company for 15 years. My high school friends that I was really good high school friends, they work for me. My college buddies that, pretty much everybody who spent because he worked 50, 60-hour weeks. So anybody he associated with on a regular basis, other than his now ex-wife, was, at the company. And now he can't go up there and bug him. He's like, it's very lonely right now. He goes, I can walk into a room of 1,000 people and still feel lonely. And I get that, because you have no connection with those individuals. And we built, like I said, we talked about earlier, so much of their identity of who they are as a human being is tied into what they do what they do, that they've pretty much given away or sold off. We had this discussion, but so many people do tie their entire sense of being into what they do on a daily basis. It's impressive that you're able to sit down with them and over time and go, let's create something outside of this that is something you can lean into when this is gone. Like, if you really want to sell this, you've got to fill, there's some voids here in your life you got to fill, right? You got to find people that you can be associated with, you find enjoyment from, and you find intellectually stimulating, right? There's emotional stimulations and intellectual stimulation, and both need to happen, right? You need to be, find the people who, just make you happy, right? They're fun to be around. And start spending time with those people, build those relationships, because when it comes time, it's hard to do from a stance of loneliness, from a stance of neediness. It's very people are very sensitive to that. They can detect it, right? You come to me all needy and I'll instantly feel it. Like, I even call them, I was like, that's like, man, I don't do well with them. I call them needers, right? Every time they call you, every time you pick up the phone, they need something from you. I push back on that, but that's who you kind of come across if you got no work, you got no job, you got money, time, and energy, but the only time you're gonna call me is when, hey man, I need somebody to talk to, or hey man, I let's go have some coffee. I need to get out of here. Like, if you have to give me the I need, something every time we speak, I push back on that a little bit, right? Whereas I love to give. I'm a person who believes that, being of service. But you can't put yourself in a situation where that's what your requirement of others is. So the fact that you're having them address that ahead of time and build those relationships and build that, can you call it social circle, right, is brilliant. And it actually helps you with their exit, because if they're spending time outside of the work, that means somebody's doing the work and they're actually starting to delegate some of that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear your perspective on it because we see the exact same thing. We use different words, like when we were talking about the quadrants, right? The draining people or those needers that you talk about, they're just coming to take whatever they can take from whoever they can take it from because they're empty and they're not working to pour into anybody else because that's not what they feel they have the capacity to do. The interesting part is if you were somebody who was going or looking to help and serve other people, many other folks would be interested in having you around because very rarely do you get the, "Hey, how are you?" No, no, really, how are you? How are things going for you? I'm really concerned or interested in what's going on in your world. Tell me a little bit about that. Maybe I can connect you with somebody. Maybe I could be the resource that you're looking for to solve whatever challenges you have going on. That is something that is met with apprehension in the beginning, but then when people actually realize that's who you are and that's how you're showing up in the world, they get addicted to it. They appreciate it because it's such a rare occurrence and experience. And, that very quickly makes you indispensable. We think about the six centers of doubt when people exit. And so you've talked about identity. We call it self image. You've talked about relationships. So we call that center of doubt relationships. Then there's the work, and that's what people are really selling the work through the manifestation of the company that they had. Then there's health, which is something that most people skip over, but a very important piece of it. I spent all this time building the thing, and now what do I do to get my health back? Because I gave it up in order to create prosperity. We use prosperity instead of wealth because we don't just care about the money. You talked about the three resources: time, energy, and the treasure. That energy in other places have been called talent. Some people call it health, but we call it energy because we think energy is that disposable resource that you get to use in a discretionary way. And then the last one, level six, is significance, right? And that is, how do I actually create a legacy? How do I make a difference? And that's why I think flipping it on his head, instead of asking people, "Hey, what can I get?" or "How can I need you to do this for me?" and saying, "Hey, what can I do for you? How can I help you out?" That's going to be the thing that makes the world a different place. And, as adults, we start talking about, "Oh, well, I don't have friends," or "I don't make new friends," or "It's hard to make friends." Here's the thing, man, because we'll have people do this 2C matrix and they're putting their five, like, "I don't have five. I've only got two," or "I've got three and four of them are my kids." I'm like, come on, guys. Like, you got five people to spend the most time with. And then when they really irritate me, I said, "Well, it takes six people to carry a casket. So what are you going to do?" And they all drop their mouths because they're like, uh-oh. So if you're not living a life where you got six folk to carry a casket, you're probably in trouble. And you probably need to reevaluate a whole lot of stuff.
It's interesting in the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs, they do isolate themselves to their business. Even self-reflection. I have a few military buddies of mine. We talk probably once every 6 months. I have a bunch of people in my community. We talk all the time, but not all of them I would consider friends, right? A lot of them are just associates. Some of them I would consider friends. And, and some of them I see enough in the value they're putting out in the world. I call them friends because I believe in what they're up to. And, but we've never, I called you a friend earlier, and I've never told you the name of my children, right? So but I believe in what you're up to, and I believe in the value of what you produce in the world, and I would stand up and, and defend you in any situation that I could. That said, it's interesting that what we consider out there as far as relationships goes. If you did the same evaluation on me and I went through your thing, I could probably tell you right now that there are one, maybe two people besides my wife and children that know me in depth enough to answer, 10 basic questions about me. There's a lot of people that we consider ourselves friends, but we get so tied up in our own existence, right, that we just don't see or talk to each other for months on end.
And I think that's okay because there's a connection, there's a kindred spirit, there's an understanding. I don't think friendship is based on frequency of interaction. I think it's based on the connection and the understanding of the essence of the person that you're dealing with. I think, and this is going to sound super woo, but we'll go there. Recognizing the energy, recognizing the soul, the humanity of the other person that you're interacting with. If you're from the same place. If you're going to the same place. And if you're on this similar journey, then yeah, that energy is friend. There's also energy that's enemy.
Oh,
And you
definitely.
gotta be careful, right? Because they want to co-opt you into doing their thing.
Let's circle back around to what is the process and the phases that people, go through in this that you guys can help them with. I want to make sure that we're focused on small business mergers, acquisitions, exiting with a sense of purpose, that type of stuff. I know we're running out of time here. We've got about 10 minutes left. Let's focus on helping people find the help they need. How do
Mhm.
people reach out to you? How do people start to figure out what it is in the world they enjoy? Those type of things.
So we developed the Neo assessment, and it's a 35 question assessment. It takes about 20 minutes to do. And it gives you basically a 6-page report that helps you understand how you're going to experience the 6 centers of doubt on your exit. This is something for somebody to take before they exit. And then the other thing that it does is it gives you recommendations on things that you can do to create fulfillment or find significance. If you know how to do those things, or if you're already working on those things, great, keep doing them. If not, and you want some help on figuring out how to do that, then we can engage and dig into what it's going to actually take for them to do it. And the way we really think about it on a deep level is, hey, if we can tell you about yourself with 35 questions and not a person interacting with you directly, imagine what we can do if we spent 2 hours talking to you about the experience that you've had and why you think about life the way that you do. And for us, we've been accurate 100% of the time, which is a track record that we really hope to keep for the duration of our practice. I've committed to doing this for the next 15 years. And the belief here is if we can help as many people as possible actually walk into their true purpose and start solving the problems for the people that they were placed on this planet to solve them for, the world would be a better place strictly through the ripple effect of what happens from those folks' impact. And that's the world that we want to live in. That's the world I want to leave to my daughters.
I've said this a couple times already. If we ask somebody, who they are, they'll tell you what they do. If I ask 100 people, what are your goals? Now it's the beginning of the year, they'll probably tell me to lose weight. They're going to give me their resolutions, right? Their New Year's resolutions. But if I ask the majority of the people, and I've done this, reason I know the answer to this question is I've done it. Like it's one of my curiosities of people. I'll ask somebody, so cool, that's your New Year's resolution. What's your 5-year goal? Where do you see yourself? It's like an interview question, but where do you see yourself? And my own wife included, most people don't have a vision. Most people don't have where do they see themselves. Even business owners, like, well, I'm going to sell this company. Cool. What do you see yourself doing after you sell? I don't know. I'll see it when I get there. Like, you got to have something you're living into, right? Like, I see it like a map. If I ask you where you headed, your story about coming from where you're located to me, if you don't know where you're going, you don't even need a map, right? If I tell you to come out to California and hang out with me, you can start heading towards California and know that's west from you, right? As long as you're heading west, you're headed in a positive direction, at least until the last few hundred miles, right? Then you kind of got to know I'm in the north side or whatever. Might not be the most efficient route, but you could get here. most people, if they don't have a pin on the map somewhere, say this is where I want to be in 5 years, or this is where I want to be in 2 years, they don't understand. They're just drifting, right? They have no sense of direction. If you don't have a goal, you don't have a mission, you don't have a plan, then you're on the perfect path. Like, what do you mean you're on the perfect path? It's like you're on the perfect path to be wandering around lost in the desert for the rest of your life. Right? So do you see that with a lot of these? I mean, I see it with everyone I run into, but these business owners, when they're selling, how do you address that? I know that's part of your process there, but do they come to you with some vision of what they think what's going to be next, or they have some
Sometimes,
goal other than I'm burnt out?
sometimes they have a vision of what's next. Many don't. And so they can do one or two things. One, they can just wander around and waste 3 to 7 years, because that's usually what we see it take for people to kind of figure it out on their own. Because it's really difficult, Ron, to read the label on when you're inside the jar. It's hard to tell you what's in there, right? You were telling me about some concoctions that you've been taking, some homemade remedies that your wife's been giving you. But those things that are in the jar, they don't actually know all the things that are in the jar. They don't know the what is that, the daily recommended value or whatever that is on the dietary labels. And we're very much like that as people. And so having an observer come in and help point out some things is going to give you a level of clarity that you're never going to get by yourself. And still, even after the 3 to 7 years, they stumble across something. Right? And so this was one of the things that I had to learn the hard way in my entrepreneurial journey. If you don't have a vision for what you're going to be or who you're going to become, other people will put their vision for you on you. And that is probably one of the most dangerous things that you can do after you work so hard to get your freedom, right? Because that was the whole point of getting to the liquidity event. Our exit continuum has 8 different exits, and exit 6 is a liquidity event. And so you get to exit 6, and now you're going to end up back in bondage because you're worried about placating to other people's desires or opinions on the things that you should or shouldn't be doing. And it just, for me, is the most backwards way to approach the newfound freedom.
It's funny, I have the same mentality. You either have an agenda or you're on an agenda, right? That's the way I put it. You either have your own agendas. My wife knows that I live by my calendar. If you don't put it on my calendar, it's not going to happen, right? And she puts stuff like, if I look at my calendar, I know exactly when she goes to work, when she's getting off, because she puts it on my calendar, right? If she wants me to kick the kids to the doctor, it's on my calendar. If I'm supposed to go to the doctor, it's on my calendar. Because if not, I wake up in the morning and, when you're dealing with other stuff too, there's depression and, anxiety and other stuff you deal with in life, especially as you get older. There's days if I wake up and there's nothing on my calendar planned out for the day, I may not want to do anything at all. Right? And that's not serving of any of my goals, and often on those days, if there's two things I do, right? If there's nothing on my calendar and I know I want to work towards my goals, a lot of times I just grab my notebooks and my tablets and stuff, and I'm 12 miles from the ocean. And the ocean brings me a sense of serenity and peace that I don't get anywhere else. But I think we all need to find a place where we're centered, whether it's a place in nature like I use, or a place with friends and stuff where we go to think. And often that escape to think is what's needed to figure out, what the next step is and where we're doing well and where we're not doing well. How do people get a hold of this? How do people? We're at the hour. We probably should wrap this up, man. So, and I could talk to you all day, but how do people make the next step and work with you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, they should go to the exitparadox.com/assessment
Hmm.
and take that assessment and get some free evaluation of their situation. And just take the time to read the report and see, one, if it's accurate for them. And then two, are they already working on the things that are going to bring them significance, or do they know how to quickly move to that? And if they do, then they probably don't need to talk to us, right? But if they find out that, hey, it's really accurate and they haven't talked to a person and they might need some help with other stuff, then we should have a conversation. And through that, there'll be some follow up emails and some other opportunities to engage with us. And we'll probably reach out and connect with them on LinkedIn as well, just to make sure that they have access to the content. The other thing that they can do that's, totally free is listen to our podcast, Your Next, where we interview founders who have exited and successfully navigated the founder's exit paradox. Because, just listening to other people's story usually helps us understand ours.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure we include those in the show notes and people know how to get a hold of you. Thank you for your time today. You've used this tool before, so hang out for a few seconds while we download the files, and we'll wrap this up and call it a show. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. This was awesome, man.
Sponsored by Dudelio. Buying or selling a small business? Assembling the right team is essential, and that's where Dudelio comes in. They work with individuals, independent sponsors, family offices, private equity firms, and small medium businesses, helping you build the perfect deal team for every stage of your acquisition or sale. And the best part, Dudelio's matching service is completely free. Visit Dudelio.com today and assemble your winning deal team.